Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and this evening we have a very special guest with us. We have Dr. Erik Bean. He is a Michigan chapter leader for Media Literacy Now. He is the founder of Healthy Mind Express, a NAMLE nonprofit partner. He is a professor of practice. He has a Ph.D. in global leadership from Indiana Tech. He is an author of award-winning books for teachers and students, and he is also the author of Bias is All Around You, a handbook for inspecting social media and news stories, and he is the winner of numerous 2022 Independent Book Publishing Awards. He's a former high school English and K-8 technology teacher, and he is with us here this evening to talk about media, credible news stories versus fake news. Good evening, Dr. Erik Bean, and thank you and welcome to the show.
Kim, it is a pleasure to be here. Just one correction. I work at Indiana Tech in their PhD in Global Leadership program, but I have a doctorate in education, as a matter of fact, from University of Phoenix.
Oh, excellent, excellent. I
Yep.
apologize for that. Thank you for that
No,
correction.
you bet.
All right, so let's get right into it.
Yep.
So, Dr. Bean, we are in I call it a political hurricane of just misinformation. There's so many things that are being said. As a child, I remember reading the newspaper. I remember going to the library, going to the card catalog, looking for a book, reading that, finding that book, reading it, and having an understanding. That meant I had to comprehend what I was reading so that I could be informed. And I remember listening to my parents and older adults talk about different books that they had read and theories, but these were scientists and doctors and educators who were writing these books. Now it seems as if we have pundits and lay people who are just out talking. And oftentimes we will have people who come up with these crazy things, like, for example, the election was stolen. When all the data and all the numbers show that nothing was nefarious about the election beyond a former president who was calling people trying to find votes so that he could stay in office. I know I'm giving you a lot. You state in your research that oftentimes the information that we ingest conforms to what we believe, our biases. Can you talk about what our biases mean, what it says about us? And then when we're reading information or watching information or listening or ingesting it, however we do that, how do we not just consume information that just aligns with what we believe? Meaning, everything that we believe, we're just looking for something to just say, yes, that's exactly what happened.
Great question. Great question. So the bottom line is we'll start at the beginning. Okay. If we want to talk about what the definition of bias is, okay, we can go to dictionary.com and we can validate the definition. But basically it comes down to an individual opinion on any given topic. But is that opinion based on good information, or is that opinion based on bad information? And what's the difference, right? And what it comes down to today, and unfortunately, maybe for a lack of a better term, but we are living in a cesspool of information because we are being bombarded on a daily basis by algorithms on our smartphone that are controlled corporations that are designed to sell you products and that may be in a bait and switch type of manner. And you're right. All of us, including myself, have become a little bit lazy these days because we're just so used to seeing the information served up to us on our smartphones. We don't go out there and hunt for it like we did in the old days when we would go to the library or find a newspaper, which usually filtered the information, and there wasn't so much overall media bias back then. But this comes down to searching for good information like Dr. Tim Voss, who wrote the foreword in my book, and he is the director of the School of Journalism at Michigan State. And he basically said that searching for information is like exercise. We have to get out there and we have to be willing to inspect information, and that takes time, it takes energy. But if we don't do it, our diet of information is going to become unhealthy for us, because we'll be dieting on, like you said earlier, confirmation bias is when we search for the first piece of information that comes along to confirm our argument, because we probably just want to win an argument in social media, when we might be better off spending time joining a grassroots efforts in our community to help people out. But that's the nature of the human being. We want to win an argument, so we find a piece of information. But here's the difference, and I can go on quite a bit. We
It's
we need
okay.
to yeah, we need to understand that information, we could divide information into two scholarly terms that I
Mm-hmm.
think everybody will easily understand. Idiosyncratic information is an editorial. It means somebody who's talking and doesn't include any citations to any other piece of information. So, if somebody's posting on social media and giving their opinion, but they don't include any other data, they don't include any other links, nothing else, that's called idiosyncratic information. It's an editorial. On the
Mm-hmm.
other scale, on the other side of the scale, is what we call homogeneous information. This is information that includes a variety of citations, attribution. It might have quotes in it. It might have paraphrasing, but it'll include other authors, other people's names. Now, one could argue that those citations could be also bad citations. They could be bad data, right? Because, statistics don't always tell us the truth. However, if we just compare the two side by side, information that includes other sources is slightly less biased than
Mm-hmm.
information that doesn't include other sources, right? So I think
Right.
right off the bat, just understanding that can help people out, help your audience out that's, wants to learn how to search for information. But here's what happened. Uh, I was teaching college English for nearly 20 years at Wayne County Community College. And when the pandemic came along, and when, quite frankly, Google came along, uh, prior to the pandemic, libraries were starting to close down at high schools
Yes.
all across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And we had principals that were just telling their students, Google everything,
Mm-hmm.
to save on costs. I think here in 2024, we might be seeing a little bit of a reverse. I've been networking with the American Library Association. I've been networking, and I think we might be seeing a resurgence of libraries starting to come back. But quite frankly, as we're talking right now, there are high schools that really don't adequately provide their students, with a library. But even at the college level, where we do have libraries, I noticed that my students' sources were degrading. They didn't understand the biases associated with various sources. So this all goes back, first of all, to the time that we were born, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when we're born into the biases of our family. We're born into the biases of our religion, our school, our friends, our community, and then in the outer circle, we have the media and the internet, right? And the internet is the biggest echo machine that we've ever had in the history of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want to know why TikTok has exploded, because TikTok happens to be a platform that allows that expansion much further than a lot of other platforms, that has given Instagram and Facebook and YouTube a run for its money, because TikTok can get the information out very fast, because you can scroll through a lot of different opinions.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a nutshell, we all have to exercise and go out there and vet the information before we share it. And that's what happened is after the insurrection and after misinformation associated with the 2020 campaign and misinformation about the immunization for the COVID-19,
Mm-hmm.
19 virus, which was actually misinformation. The CDC gave misinformation about
Mm-hmm.
it, and they didn't
Mm-hmm.
correct it in time fast enough. But I noticed people, adults in my own social media network, they were sharing outdated information. I couldn't believe it.
Yes.
I looked
Mm-hmm.
at someone's post, and it was 5 years old. And it doesn't mean that old information is bad, but if you're going to share something, I think you owe it to your audience to vet it first and tell people why you believe this piece of information is good. Because people, we naturally want to consume information, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like we have to eat food to stay alive, right? But a lot of times our inner circle affects the way we pick and choose information because we don't want to necessarily, um, pick information that our inner circle wouldn't approve. That uncle around the Thanksgiving Day table, which we're all going to have to face pretty soon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has an opinion, and we don't want to disagree. And, that's part of our inner circle. But we all need an inner circle because there's so much information out there, we can't possibly all digest it. So I do have a little survey, which is at biashandbook.com/tools on that page. And you can take a 7-question survey to see if your inner circle affects your ability to interact with information. So, in a nutshell, that's where we have to begin. But the truth is, most people, don't want to be told how to search for information because they're kind of set in their ways. We're kind of set in
Mm-hmm.
their ways. And it's a difficult uphill battle. But I think we need to, look at it like anything else. We need to eat right, we need to exercise, and we also need to learn how to digest information better before we share it. And so when you're ready, I can talk about one aspect that I learned when I was teaching all those English students, those composition students, is that I learned that information can be divided into seven overall sources of impartiality that have their own unique biases. And I think that's the place to start when we want to first look at the biases before we get to conflicts of interest,
Mm-hmm.
before we get to fallacies that could be baked into the piece.
Mm-hmm.
So
Go ahead.
you're
Go
pro
ahead,
just
Dr. Bean. Go ahead.
I'm going to go for a touchdown.
There we
Uh,
go.
yeah, so the 7 sources of all impartiality are for-profit, nonprofit, academic, government, hidden agenda, which could be artificial intelligence, or there's simply no author, watchdog groups, which are like a nonprofit, but they're supposed to be watching over all the other groups, and individuals like you and I that can contribute to a national or global conversation simply by posting on the internet. So the bottom line is that when we get a piece of information, and it doesn't matter if it's digital. It doesn't matter if it's analog. It doesn't matter if it's TikTok. It doesn't matter if it's a newsletter, newspaper, magazine, television show, radio broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
When we get this piece of information, we have to say to ourselves, which one or more of the 7 sources does the author who is doing the talking belong to? And once we determine that, then we have to say, okay, the overall message already has a little bit of bias because if somebody is a for-profit, they're already overvaluing their products because they have to. We live in a free
Mm-hmm.
enterprise society. We need to buy goods and services, but we need to be cautious. It's one thing if Ford Motor Company says that their Ford Fusion is the best midsize car around, but is that Ford saying it, or did they hire an independent market research company to
Mhm.
evaluate that? And so it's less bias, right? And then we have, nonprofits. They have their particular biases, churches, synagogues, people for the ethical treatment of animals. I'm not saying that any information is bad. I'm not saying it. What I am saying is that already based on the category, that there's just a little bit of bias because the message overall has that category's overall bias, right? So in the academy, universities, most of them are designed to publish knowledge, right?
Mhm.
Especially if they're research based, right? And
Mhm.
there's a saying called publish or perish. And so we need to check their research, and we need to check where they're getting their research published, and so on and so forth. The government publishes, thousands of pieces of literature all across the United States and across the world. You know, I think we'd have to be pretty foolish to say that all of the literature that they publish is all accurate. It could be misaccurate. It could be
Mhm. Mhm.
it could be misleading. It could be overinflated, sensationalized,
Mhm.
and so on and so forth. And then, hidden agendas. We don't know who authored it. Now we have artificial intelligence
Right.
where somebody can take our likeness, duplicate it. We've all heard of, fake TikTok sites, fake Facebook sites. People in Russia can set up, a fake person in a picture, and they can
Mhm.
post their opinion to sway voters. And it's a never ending cycle of so much of a glut of information. And but this is why when we're done looking at the seven uh, areas of overall impartiality, right, the seven categories, then we need to be talking about conflicts of interest and fallacies that could be baked in to
Mhm.
these communications, right? So the fallacies, I'll just start with two of them,
Mhm.
and uh, and then I'll catch my breath. But the two of the most popular ones are hasty generalization. So
Mhm.
hasty generalization is a fallacy. It's when we tend to immediately believe something because it confirms our
Mhm.
biases.
Mhm.
But hasty generalization, means that we just haven't done our research. We haven't inspected information quickly, or
Right.
information was, published too quickly. Now, ad populum is another popular fallacy. Ad populum says that if something is heard or seen or duplicated many, 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 many times, then it must be true. So, in our brains, we tend to think, well, wait a minute, I saw it there, I saw it there, I read it there, I heard it there, I heard it there. And after a while, we don't want to even validate it anymore because we might be just simply overwhelmed. We may know it might not be good information, but some of us may be swayed by it, right? Ad
Mhm.
populum. We
Mhm.
know a lot of politicians use ad populum on all
Yeah.
sides, all
Yeah.
sides,
Mhm.
you know. So, you know, then we can talk about outliers as well. But just to get the ball rolling, that's where we're at right now. That's where we're at.
Oh, Dr. Bean, you have
Uh,
given us so much, but I got to go back to something
yeah,
you were saying
sure.
earlier. And
Yeah,
so I work in a university, so I understand that. A lot of the professors, I'm not faculty, an administrator.
yeah,
However, a lot of the faculty members, they do publish. I agree with you, publish or perish. I've heard that before.
yeah,
What I find fascinating though with students, because we've had to have conversations about Chat GPT when writing legal papers, because I work at a law school,
yeah.
making sure that they're studying, that they're comprehending it, that they're using their own words. I've had to say the same thing to my own children. I have a high schooler and a middle schooler. And, it's real easy for them to just go on the computer and just pull up something and say, okay, mom, my papers. No, it's not. No, we're not doing that. You got to put the work in. I
Yeah.
remember Dr. Bean as a young student. Wikipedia was everything. And
Oh
I
yeah.
remember every professor I had, do not cite Wikipedia. Do not cite Wikipedia. And it was funny because when you said all the different teachers and professors and principals were saying, just Google. And a lot of kids were using Wikipedia. What has happened, Dr. Bean? I
Yeah.
thought Wikipedia was considered publicly sourced, if I'm saying that correctly, meaning anybody can go in and
Yeah.
add it. So it's
That's
not
true.
a reliable source of
Well,
information.
but you know what? It is and it isn't.
Okay.
And I can tell you a little story. I remember a couple of years ago, it must have been a Sunday afternoon. I was watching an old movie, maybe on Turner
Mm-hmm.
Classic or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And then, so I naturally wanted to Google that film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you know, I'm just curious, where are the people now and, who produced it? So when I Googled it on the day that I was watching it, Wikipedia came up for that film.
Mm-hmm.
And it said that the day that I was watching it in Wikipedia was the first day that that classic film was shown on television. And I
Wow.
thought, wow, yeah. So I thought, wow, somebody who is updating that Wikipedia page, whoever they are, they were trying to give updated and accurate information. And so what I tell my students in general, when it comes to Wikipedia, you know, if there's no references, then no one's taking care of that page. But if there's a dozen references in Wikipedia, if it says that it was last updated more recently, maybe the information was more accurate. And the other thing I can tell students is why not take the sources that you find in Wikipedia and then go straight to the horse's mouth if
Yes.
you can to see
Mm-hmm.
if that can possibly validate it. So in the book, and I say our book because it was edited by Sherry Wexler. She's got an amazing talent to take complex information and make it understandable for audiences. And our illustrator cut out all the images in the book, hand cut them out of paper sourced all over the world. So all the images are done by paper. And the reason why, and that was done by Gail Gorski. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I say our book is because I have to give them credit or I wouldn't have had such a nice book. But the bottom line is that we have an image in the book. We remember that child's game of with the circle and telling a
Mm-hmm.
secret, right? And whispering it. And what happens at the end of the circle is that if you say a couple of sentences, by the time it gets around the circle, it's changed, right? And
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
that's that's just a perfect example of the internet echo machine, where by the time it gets filtered around the internet, the original message gets changed. And I even remember one time when I was working on my doctorate degree, I had a woman who was a committee member, and she was the leading expert on something called immediacy in the online and on-ground classroom. And Dr. Suzanne Easton, and she said that I had misparaphrased from one of her articles, not misquoted,
Mm-hmm.
misparaphrased, and that carried throughout the dissertation. So I was required to fix that before I could at that time go to defend my dissertation. So it's just a lesson for us all that, when we quote, we need to quote verbatim and we need to cite that source, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so on the internet, it's the same thing. If politicians are talking, we need to look at the data. We need to think about, how do they vote? There's no truth in advertising today for the
Right.
politicians on
Mm-hmm.
television. It's a sad thing that there's really no one for the commercials doing a lot of fact checking these days. Um, but we could go back to the 1980s, an era that you and I probably,
Mm-hmm.
remember very well here in the Detroit area. I remember
Mm-hmm.
WXYZ,
Yep.
Action News.
Mm-hmm.
If you think of, Bill Bonds, he was a
Yes.
lead
Mm-hmm.
anchor there,
Mm-hmm.
and he was chastised a lot because he editorialized a lot with the
Mm-hmm.
news. But
Mm-hmm.
they kept him WXYZ, probably because he was a very influential character
Yes.
and he had a likable personality. But in the 1980s, we also had from the Federal Communications Commission, we had
Hmm.
a little known law that said time will be provided for opposing views
Yes.
on
I
TV.
remember that.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep. And then at the end of the newscast, somebody from, the city or, a nonprofit would come on and give their opinion. But the reason why they got rid of that, Kim, is because there could not only be two sides to a story, there could be five sides to a story, there can be a dozen sides, and they could never honor the time.
Hmm.
They could never honor
Hmm.
the time because and by the way, for that matter, we could have six people, a dozen people in the same room witnessing event, and then afterwards, when they get out, they could all have different interpretations of the event, even though we were all there,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That's a whole other issue about, you know. So, but it comes down to what we say in the book, critical thinking,
Hmm.
right? Is that we need to stop. We need to stop sharing so quickly. We need to take a deep breath,
Hmm.
right? Need to take a deep breath. We just need to take a deep breath. And we want to use information with what I like to call prudence and goodwill, right? Information should never be designed to hurt people, ever, ever, ever. Information should only be designed to help people. And so, we have to look at the medium in which the message is delivered too,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So, is the medium more powerful than the message? And this goes back to traditional, journalistic theories. So a lot of people are getting their news today from the mediums, from social media. When
Hmm.
Fox News was sued and they lost the case,
Yes.
they Fox News, it was determined that they were lying about the election and they were part of it. They had one teeny weeny tiny argument. They had one teeny weeny tiny argument. And that was they said, well, when we said that, it wasn't during a news broadcast. It was during one of our entertainment shows in the evening, right? So they were saying that was entertainment, that wasn't news. So the medium in which the message is delivered is very important, right? It's very
Right.
important,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
So and uh, that's really the conundrum right now. But fortunately, I am working with students. I still teach at the community college level, and I am working with students. I have two assignments that are media literacy assignments tied to the book. One is an essay on the seven sources of all bias. The second assignment I have is an assignment where we ask students to pick a social media influencer that they follow,
Hmm.
and then there's a one-page bias assessment form because everybody likes one page and something that's simple. And we ask students to objectively to go in and rate the biases, the conflicts of interest, to score it, if you will. And the higher the score, the more biased the piece. But the problem or the challenge is, can students do this maturely and objectively? Can students rate somebody who they
Hmm.
like? It could be a rock star, an entertainer. It could be a
Hmm.
sports personality, a football player, baseball player, basketball player, that they admire. And can they effectively look at if some information that they might have posted about an issue, that famous person, that
Hmm.
influencer, and can they
Hmm.
rate, various levels of biases associated with that? So right now we're doing research on that, and I'm actually working on a study for Indiana Tech to see what students think. And I'll be presenting next March at Nova Southeastern University at the 16th annual Qualitative Report Conference to share what students think of this bias assessment form, because I don't claim it's perfect. Nothing is in this world of information, but we got to start somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
got to start somewhere. So, but in a nutshell, this is what we're facing right now, where we kind of have to tell not just students, but adults,
Mm-hmm.
take a step back, you know, try to find a journalistic source first, and then we can talk about outliers when we have time, when you're ready. But I want to let you get
Yes.
a word edge in wise here. Yeah,
So we're coming to that, I promise. This is so
yeah,
fascinating to me. And thank you. You are giving us so much information.
you
You
bet.
know, the emotionalism that most people get caught up in. You reference in your research, there are six corporations, six that
Yeah,
control media. And I always say, I don't like to watch the news because the first 15 minutes, I call it murder, death, kill. Who got
yep,
killed? Who died? Who's shooting? What violent crimes are happening? And you know, in Detroit, we were formerly known as the murder capital. And a lot of people say, but you're still the murder capital. I'm like, nope, we're not. Actually, there's another city that's taking it over. I'm not going to mention it. But I
yeah,
say that to say, because you said six corporations and you listed them: Comcast,
yep,
NBC Universal, Disney, CBS, Viacom News Corporation, and AT&T control approximately 90% of all media outlets in America. I want to contrast it against Fox News because Fox News, I remember that. And people kept saying, but they can do that because they list themselves as entertainment. I said, but the people that are watching this, getting emotional, believe that it's
yeah,
news and they are trusting these people. The way that you talked about Bill Bonds, I remember Bill Bonds. We had, what was it,
yeah,
Bill Bonds, Diana Lewis. You had Carmen Harlan on
yep.
WDIV. I'm trying to remember who was on WJBK.
Well,
Uh,
we had Joe Glover. Remember Joe Glover on Channel 2,
yep.
and
Mhm.
Beverly Payne.
Beverly
Beverly
Payne. Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
And so you had these different personalities, like you had Walter Cronkite for
Yeah.
60 minutes. These were people that when they came on television and they told the news, you listened, you felt
Yes.
informed. As you said, it was editorialized. However, you believe them because I had been told that journalists always had to remain neutral. You did not want to put your opinion into something. But when I watch Fox News, I don't see that. And oftentimes I'll even say with CNN and MSNBC, I'm yelling at the screen and I'm like, why are you putting your opinion? And I remember during COVID
Yeah.
when all the misinformation was going around. Now I lost my
No, no. Well,
question
no,
for you.
but that what you're saying is so. By the way, many years ago, we had many newspapers that
Yes.
had that had the word mirror in their title.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken, we can check this, but I think there was the Royal Oak Mirror.
I
And
believe so.
the bottom line, the reason why there was the mirror is because the news is supposed to mirror the news.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Mm-hmm.
supposed to recreate it or
Right.
editorialize about it. Now, we can still, have editorials, and we can still talk about what the news means, but we have to understand the context. And that's why you might remember, years ago in newspapers, if there
Mm-hmm.
was a story that was if there was an advertisement that looked like a news headline, they had to have the word advertisement at the
Yes.
top, right?
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
but today we're living in a no man's land. It's the old
Right.
West. It's the old West.
Yes.
We don't know sometimes, what's news, what's an ad. I presented, and I was very fortunate to have gotten accepted to present at the University of Oxford in 2018. And I
Mm.
presented a paper to give ideas on how digital advertisers could be required to be more transparent. But complicating the matter is that since anybody can, be an affiliate for any social media and set up a web page, you know, anybody can be sending out any kind of information. So it is virtually difficult, to track. We could also get into other problems, of social media, where we have, self-image problems for young people. We have too much graphic information. TikTok is being sued right now by
Mm-hmm.
13 states because their information is too graphic and too transparent, and they can't
Mm-hmm.
protect young people from that information.
Right.
But, I don't want to digress too much because we are focusing on, misinformation. But the social media companies, I think, do owe us a better job of filtering the information. They could develop a programmable scale where you come to a web page and there could be a percentage that says what the overall bias is. But then what's going to happen is people will say, well, who is behind the board that made the
Right.
percentage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, even when I interviewed ChatGPT in early 2023, and I asked ChatGPT, I said, which one of the 7 overall sources do you believe you belong to in that article that I provided you?
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT responded and said, I'm academic because I was programmed not to be biased. Well, I mean, that's a good answer, but artificial intelligence can have hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
Artificial intelligence can have biases built into it, biases of which could be motivated for profit interest because ChatGPT, for example, is owned by OpenAI and they're a for profit. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't know when that might come to surface with the artificial intelligence. And the truth is, for every bot that is out there and all the different AI systems, Copilot, all the different, they're all being programmed behind the scenes. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's good intention. They want these, AI to be objective. They want AI to sound more human-like. But, inevitably, we have to still proceed with caution.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Bean, let's talk about outliers, and then we're going to
Okay.
get to
Oh,
our last question.
you bet. I'm glad you remembered that one.
Yes.
Um, so you know what? Outliers, which is actually kind of funny, I think, how the way words work, right? Here's a term called outlier, which really can be one of our best friends when it comes to searching information. So even though it has the word liar in it, um, right? But the truth of the matter is outliers, and I'll give a perfect example. Here in the state of Michigan, we recently passed a law, and I'm sure you've heard of it,
Mm-hmm.
where you're not allowed to hold anything in your hand while you're driving. Essentially, we're not allowed to hold our cell phone in our hand.
Yes.
So I immediately went out and I bought one of those cup cell phone
Mm-hmm.
holders,
Mm-hmm.
so I can touch it, but I'm not holding it. But the bottom line is the media, anybody talking about that story can't give us all the details because, there's time requirements, there's page size requirements, there's audio limitations, video limitations. But if you really want to know what the law says, if you want to know really, am I allowed to hold a Rand McNally map in my hands? You got to go to the municipality that first passed the law. I think it was Troy. I'm not sure.
I believe so.
And
Yeah.
we would call Troy up and we'd say, "Hey, Troy, can you email me the law that
Mm-hmm.
you first had in your community about, drivers not holding anything in their hand?" And then, these laws are much more detailed.
Yes.
You work in the legal school every day, and so then we could, but we can't have an intelligent conversation. Here's the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. When I tell them, now you got to work on a thesis, an
Mm-hmm.
argumentative thesis. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, I tell them I'd like for you to have 2 variables tied to something meaningful because we don't want you just to editorialize a stance, an argument.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about that in another subject. But I say to them, you really can't write a thesis until you've been well read. How can
Mm-hmm.
you if you just write a thesis without doing any investigation, you're just using what's on the top of your head and when you think that you're knowledgeable. Now, some people are very knowledgeable. If you've raised Alaskan Huskies for 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
you you might know more about Alaskan Huskies than maybe some vets because you've spent 20 years
Mm-hmm.
close up and you could
Mm-hmm.
write an interesting thesis about the behavior of Alaskan Huskies. Absolutely, that's your first person experience. But the bottom line is for most subjects, we don't have, we all we have is our everyday knowledge that we get through bits and bytes on the internet. But for any subject, we need to dig deep. So these outliers, we need to go to other sources to validate how accurate the information is, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
municipalities, whether it's, cities, villages, going to the library, talking to people who originally authored something, if you're able to do that, and so forth. Now, the book also talks about the Greek rhetorical styles,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and how to apply those to assess overall bias. I know we don't have time to go into that this evening, but the bottom line is we got to do some surveillance on the authors who create information, because the background of the author affects their information, how they were raised, which is fine,
Mm-hmm.
especially for creative efforts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but when we want to be objective, you know, can that get in the way of their objectivity because they were raised that way? Or, what's their current subject matter expertise? And I operationally look at the Greek rhetorical style of mythos. The last three or four things that somebody published on the internet, well, I say that's their current subject matter expertise right now.
Ah,
And
okay.
you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
and so that's also on the bias assessment for that. You score their current subject matter expertise, you score their background, you score pathos is strict emotion, which is
Mm-hmm.
idiosyncratic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we don't want pieces that are just robotic. We want writing to have emotion in it because topics are very serious, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can be, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, just to round out with the outliers, we need to do our own fact checking, check the facts, and so forth, and don't just rely on our inner circle, and don't just rely on the first piece of information that comes along. Uh, and because remember, our inner circle includes affinity bias,
Mm-hmm.
halo bias, that you only look at information that others will approve, or you want to fit in, and so forth. So all part of the mix.
Wow, Dr. Erik Bean. Thank you so much for being
Oh,
here. You have given us a lot to think about. I
you
know
bet.
that next time when I'm on social media and I'm looking at news articles or on the web, I will definitely be thinking about, okay, who is this person? Is this one of the seven models? Is this confirming something that I already believe? What is their motivation? Is this owned by one of the companies that you talked about? What kind of bias is this, somebody that I approve of or that I want approval from? Lots and lots of good
Yeah.
things.
And
Go ahead.
conflict of interest. Yeah, conflict of interest. Are
Mm-hmm.
they do they represent something that they're ultimately trying to sell? And then we have the fallacies. Do they really not have data to back up what they're saying? And absolutely, absolutely. And again, and it takes time. We're very busy these days. We all want things as fast as we can get. But it's like anything else. If we achieve something so fast, what would have been the gain out of it if we didn't really
Mm-hmm.
learn along the way, right? Or along
Mm-hmm.
the process. So,
Mm-hmm.
but you are right, Kim. And thank you for reminding your listeners. Just take a step back, and inspect information, and don't share it. We didn't even have time to talk about cognitive dissonance. Because that's a stressful feeling. Cognitive dissonance, Festinger,
Yes, go ahead. Yep.
1957. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Cognitive dissonance is when we behave differently than our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that relate it to information? While there's no conclusive evidence on this, there hasn't been really any studies about this yet. But if you share a piece of information and, have you ever shared something and then thought, well, maybe I shouldn't have shared it, and you kind of had a
Mm-hmm.
bad feeling. But that's why I say on page 50 of the book, for example, and this may be something good to close on. I say on page 50 of the book, if if someone walked into a theater and screamed fire, and there was no fire, they would be arrested in our
Yes.
country. They'd be arrested,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? We don't know what would motivate somebody to do that. We don't know what's somebody that, they're propagating a false narrative by doing
Mm-hmm.
that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so then I wonder how serious is it if we share a piece of information that we know isn't true? I hope we don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
We can only hope. We can't guarantee that all the information we share can be accurate. I understand that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think if, cognitive dissonance says that we should all experience a little unsettling feeling, little stressful, unsettling feeling that we knew we probably should not have shared it so quickly, or
Mm-hmm.
we should have at least let our audience know more about the author and the piece of information. And so that's where I think cognitive dissonance can come into, play like this, is that, information, should be shared, um, after it's inspected. Absolutely. So I hope that helps.
That was brilliant, Dr. Erik Bean. Yes, that does help. I will definitely keep that in mind. Before we get out of here, tell us
Yep.
where we can purchase your book. Tell us how we can find you. Are you on social media?
I absolutely am. So on Facebook, you can just type in Biases All Around You, and we have a page there just for the book. I also can be found on the Media Literacy Now website. I'm the Michigan chapter representative. We're trying to get more K through 12 legislation. I've been trying to work with some senators. It's been an uphill battle. They've have a lot more on their plate these days.
Mm-hmm.
You could also go to biashandbook.com where you can get the complete background on the book. The book is available in soft cover and hardcover on Amazon as well as Barnes and Noble. It's also available as a 72-minute unabridged Audible download file. If you don't have time to read, you could listen to it on your smartphone in your car for 6 minutes. And so right now, that's where you can get the book, and some libraries around our community also have it. And so you might not even have to buy it, but it's available. And I'll also be speaking in other libraries around town. Next March, I'll be at the Shelby Township Public Library in the
Mm-hmm.
evening, and speaking at other groups as well. So thank you for asking.
No problem. And how can people reach you if they have additional questions or want to learn
Yep.
more about your work?
You can send an email directly to me at profbean, PROFBEAN, at gmail.com, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or point you in the right direction if I don't know the answer.
Thank you, Dr. Bean. We enjoyed having you on the show. You have to come back again because this is a
Oh,
fascinating conversation. We're going to have a part two because there was so much more that we just weren't able to get into. But thank you.
absolutely. Kim, thank you very much. Namaste. I appreciate the time this evening and look forward to this, floating around social media. And hopefully, people will take a step back and think before they share.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for tuning into the Kim B. Davis Show. You know me as your host, Kim B. Davis. You can find me everywhere on social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, LinkedIn, everywhere as Kimberly Bachelor Davis. Bachelor is spelled Batchelor. You can see this show at youtube.com/Kimberly Bachelor Davis. You can hear this show at Spotify, Stitcher, Google, and Wisdom. And you can learn more about me as an author at kimbdavis.com. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can email me at kimberly@kimberlybachelordavis.com. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you'll join us on our next episode. And as always, remember, be magnificent.